I know where you live. And guess what? I live there too. I hover around all of you. I know no color barrier, no religion, no morality, no currency. I speak your language fluently, and with every voice I take away, I acquire yet another language. I work very quickly. I work faster than pediatric AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. And if you are happily married, I will make sure that your marriage fails. Your money will fall into my hands, and I will bankrupt you for my own self-gain. I don't sleep, so I make sure you don't either. I will make it virtually impossible for your family to easily attend a temple, a birthday party, a public park, without a struggle, without embarrassment, without pain. You have no cure for me. Your scientists don't have the resources, and I relish their desperation. Your neighbors are happier to pretend that I don't exist, of course, until it's their child. I am autism. I have no interest in right or wrong. I derive great pleasure out of your loneliness.
When we look back at what the Nazis did, it's hard to imagine anybody would still think in that way. But in reality, the organization Autism Speaks shares a lot of the same values that were the basis for the purge of Jews back in World War II. Autism Speaks was founded in February 2005 by Bob and Suzanne Wright. Bob wears a lot of hats, including a lawyer, businessman, right-wing lobbyist, and author. He also served as the president and CEO of NBC Universal. Many people think that Autism Speaks is a good charity that gives resources to families in need, but actually, they lie about those efforts. In reality, less than 4% of the millions of dollars they receive went to supporting autistic people and their families. The majority of their funding actually went to different foundations which did research, as well as their own personal messaging and branding. On November 11, 2013, the charity sent out a press release titled Autism Speaks to Washington, a call for action. The language used in this post does support the idea that Autism Speaks is mostly a lobbying organization, but what are they lobbying for exactly? The post starts out with the co-founder and husband of Bob, Suzanne Wright, stating, "This week is the week that America will finally wake up to the autism crisis." She then goes on to state that an autistic child costs about $2.3 million to raise over their lifetime. In fact, though, many of the sources have stated that it's actually around $300,000 to $400,000. It's not far off from the $300,000 it would cost to raise a typical child. Even if the sourcing for this figure was done well, what good does it do to the child to know that they are such a burden, that their existence is so expensive, that it causes suffering around them? It's almost identical to the 1877 book titled The Jukes, a study in crime, pauperism, disease, and hereditary, which calculated the escalating annual cost to society for welfare, imprisonment, and other social services on a family. The effects of it went out to scientists all over the world, including those in America and Germany. The book was then used to support eugenics and the deaths of the unfit and undesired people. Much of what Suzanne was talking about in her post correlates with a lot of these ideals, going into detail about how autistic people are incredible burdens on their family. She then calls for a plan of action on a national level, but does not express her plan or what it might entail. This is because the plan she is talking about is eugenics. The precursor to what we now call the Holocaust actually started with those who were deemed mentally ill. On August 18, 1939, the Reich Ministry of Interior created a decree requiring all physicians, nurses, and midwives to report infants and children under 3 that showed signs of severe mental or physical disability. This led to a program that was titled T4. This was a precursor to the death camps that killed millions of people in the Holocaust, and in these hospitals, they would starve and torture mentally ill people that they deemed unfit for society. The progression of this had them begin lethal injections and then gassing. The gassing techniques they developed on these unfit people were then borrowed and utilized later on during World War II. Much of what Autism Speaks does is research, and specifically, the research they do is the prenatal identification of autism. We have yet to see the true effects of what this entails, but going from data and past examples, for those in the US who learned that their child had Down syndrome, 85% of mothers chose to terminate their pregnancy. Those would have not otherwise gotten an abortion chose to abort the fetus. And this is not only due to the research in prenatal screenings that Autism Speaks does, but also the advertising and propaganda they do that present having an autistic child as a nightmare you cannot escape. Here's an example of that.
I didn't choose to do this. I'm not a therapist. I was drafted. I have an autistic child.
But I remember that was a very scary moment for me when I realized I had sat in the car for about 15 minutes and actually contemplated putting Jody in the car and driving off the George Washington Bridge, and that would be preferable to having to put her in one of these schools.
A study in Taiwan asked parents that have autistic children about a hypothetical situation where they become pregnant again and autism was diagnosed prenatally. 53% of those said they would abort such a pregnancy, and in Iceland, abortion rates of fetuses with Down syndrome are close to 100%, with that being essentially eradicated. The treatment Autism Speaks advocates for is what's called applied behavioral analysis, short for ABA. ABA approaches have evolved since their inception, but their roots lie in what is essentially abuse and torture. In the past, ABA doctors would regularly administer electric shocks as a disincentive for unwanted behavior, and many have been accused of beating and spitting on their patients. Many variations of ABA involve forced eye contact and eliminating certain behaviors such as stimming. In fact, many people who have experienced this say that forcing eye contact and penalizing self-comfort behavior such as stimming actually increases their stress and lowers their levels of functioning in many environments. What Autism Speaks advocates for is not a world where autistic people can function, but instead a world where autistic people need to conform. They don't want to help anything, they want to cure the thing that they see as a disease. I am autistic. There's nothing about me that needs to be cured. I understand that the world will never normalize the type of behavior that I cannot help, but I never asked for a cure for who I am. I'd like to thank you for listening to this video, and if you did enjoy, please type in the comments and maybe we can have a conversation. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.